Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm Sharon Holbrook. I'm an editor here at Your Teen. I'm here with the Phyllis Fagell. Phyllis is, I like to call you Phyllis, a middle school whisperer. You
I
are
don't know about that.
Phyllis is a school counselor and a therapist, and she's the author of Middle School Matters, which is an excellent book on middle school. And today we're here to talk about middle school friendships, which there's a lot to say about usually. And I want to invite those who are watching, if you have questions for Phyllis or comments, you can put them in. You can just put them in Facebook in the comments, and we should see them, and we'll try to get to your questions if you have them. So I was thinking about this morning, Phyllis, and I was thinking of the cruelty of the fact that in our district in middle school, there are a couple of events that require you to pick roommates. I mean,
Oh,
we have sixth grade camp in our town, and everybody knows that it's coming in May, and the angst over who's gonna bunk with who, and you can request people, and like is anyone requesting me? And then in eighth grade, there's another trip. We have a trip to Washington, D.C., and the
oh
roommate
wow.
talks starts early. So I just was thinking how, I don't know if it's funny or cruel or both, that we layer this on top of the existing middle school friendship dilemmas.
Hopefully the school can soften it just a little bit the way that, and we have a similar situation. They have to pick who they want in their yurt, but we don't ever share who they have chosen. We ask for several names. We explain that we
Yes.
have to balance lots of competing needs of different students and that you may or may not get the people you want. But I agree, it is one of those, it's kind of like the old school way of picking teams in gym that no one does anymore,
Right.
where you take turns and then there's that one person standing at the end. You have to be really careful how you do those assignments. But on the other hand, you don't want someone to be in a yurt or a tent with somebody who they absolutely who will ruin the trip for them or who they've just had a huge fight. So balancing those needs is hard. And actually it comes up a lot in middle schools for all kinds of things, including things like talent shows or even a bake sale, Halloween, who's going to be dressed the same as somebody else? And one year it was getting so intense that I told the students that we had a school rule that you could not talk about either the talent show groupings or, and I did this again with the Halloween groupings and costumes more than a couple weeks before the actual event. And one of the middle schoolers looked at me and said, wait a second, when did this become a rule? And I said, today. It became a rule today. So yeah, all of those situations are really, really hard for kids.
And why is middle school age in particular so fraught when it comes to friendship? Is there something developmental going on? What's happening?
Everything is going on. And right now, especially, I feel like I've been calling the middle schoolers I'm seeing now extreme middle schoolers because it's all the same stuff. You have all the normal churn of those friendships in middle school where the research shows only a third of friendships make it to the fall to spring of that first year of middle school. And if you ask kids to name their best friend, only about half of them will name that person back. So these are really fragile, not necessarily reciprocal, enduring friendships. And all of that already is in existence. You've got the maturity gap between kids. So they may have been on the exact same level playing Barbies in fifth grade, moved on to middle school. One of them is ranking their crushes and wearing makeup, and the other one is still very much kind of dreading that growing up process, wants to stay young. And so there can be these temporary bumps in the road with even old time friends. And I do always tell kids to try really hard not to burn bridges because those friendships can cycle back in, which is also somewhat reassuring to them, as are the statistics, which show that everybody is going through that kind of changing, shifting dynamics. And so that's hard. Your body's changing. And then on top of it, right now, you have some kids who have not had in-person school in any kind of consistent way we're in the third year of this. So even on top of the normal changing, shifting friendships, they may have had even more disruption or be more insecure, not know where they stand. Some kids did a better job staying in touch with friends than others. And, the list goes on.
Right. And when there's, a lot of kids return to school for the first time in a long time this fall. And I think from what I hear from people, it was a bit of a seismic shock. Like all that drift, it was kind of laid bare when everybody came back together at the same time. What's our role as parents when it comes to drift or change? Like you said you encourage kids not to burn bridges. Should we also do that as parents? Because sometimes we see the friendship fade and we think, oh, I really like that kid. I wish they would stay close with them. But what's our role there?
So when I say don't burn bridges, I don't mean you have to stay friends. I mean, don't do something that's irreparable. Instead of telling them you don't want to be friends anymore, or doing something dramatic to blow it up, which sometimes kids do because they don't really know another way out and they find that the other person is clingy, to instead maybe take a little longer to respond to a text, or to see them only outside of school, or to only talk to them inside of school so that they don't feel totally excluded, but maybe make fewer sleepover plans with them outside of school, and just to do it a little bit more gradually and with some kindness. And that's where parents can come in. We can't tell a child to be friends or to not be friends with somebody. It's going to backfire, and we want them to develop that self-awareness and those insights on their own anyway. But what we can do is offer some tips, offer some coaching. We can point out when we notice that they're not themselves with a particular friend, or if someone seems to be making them feel unhappy more than happy, we can ask them how they feel about it. We can ask them who they really feel good with. We can frame it in a more positive way. We can encourage them not to make a decision that could come back to haunt them later. So I do think monitoring their social media, not reading everything. I still have a middle schooler. It's my third middle schooler in my house. So I'm on round 3 of having a 13-year-old at home. And I would not want to read everything that they are posting and sharing. But you do want to look enough that you can point out when you see them going down a road that is not going to be helpful to them, or when you see that they're trying really hard to impress somebody or to be funny, and it is not actually going to serve them in the way they think it's going to serve them.
And do you communicate with your child that they know that might happen, that you might be reading the text?
Oh, 100%. And they still will forget, and they still will make those mistakes, and that's to be expected. And it's really important not to shame your child when you do see that they're making a mistake, to approach the whole situation with some curiosity, to remember they have never been in that exact experience before. Most likely, they don't have a lot of perspective about how other people might be feeling or how they might make someone else feel. They don't have the benefit of direct eye contact. There is this perception that it's fleeting when, as we all know, you can always take a screenshot of something. But I think it is important to remind your child that what looks like meanness or what feels horribly wounding isn't for the same reasons necessarily a kid trying to be mean. It's usually clumsiness or just kind of a misguided attempt at humor. When I was recently in a 7th grade classroom and I asked all of them what they would do if they had plans to have a sleepover with another child in the grade who didn't have a lot of social capital and who they knew was really excited to have them have that sleepover, and then they got an offer that they wanted more from a really close friend, and I asked them what they would do, they all thought they were being kind and could justify their choice, whether they chose to stick with the initial plan or make plans instead with that closer friend. They could justify it by saying, well, they're a much closer friend. I wouldn't want to let them down. And so they will twist themselves into a pretzel to make it work for them. And it isn't because they don't care about the feelings of that first child if they're backing out. It's really that they are so egocentric at this age, and they're so obsessed with their own standing and their own sense of belonging in that peer group that it's really easy for them to find a way to rationalize some decisions that are hurtful.
So it sounds like whether our kid is being hurtful or they're misinterpreting perhaps something that they see as hurtful, that's a place where we can help them figure that out as parents and have conversations about it. What's an example of approaching something like that with curiosity, like what would you say, you saw a situation where your kid was not being as nice as you'd like or as kind as
Yeah.
you'd like on text. What do you say when you want to approach that with curiosity to your child?
I think that one way to do it is to not start with the mistake, to be having these conversations long before they make that mistake, and to let them know you expect them to make mistakes, and that you want to, in so many words, save them from themselves or help them learn from your wisdom that you've accrued over time. But there are some questions you can ask long before they make those mistakes that I think can help kids, or long before you've caught that mistake. One of them is, I love to have kids go through either their text chains, especially if it's a big group text chain, or if they're on Snapchat or Instagram, to go through their feeds and ask them to find the post that is not consistent, that's inconsistent with the others, either because it doesn't sound like them, it doesn't feel like them, or it doesn't reflect the kind of person they want to be, or they have a feeling it fell flat. And ask them what was different about the situation when they made that post. Were they sleep deprived? Were they angry? Were they jealous? Were they talking to people who always make them feel a little uncomfortable and they try a little bit too hard? Because if you can help them recognize in advance what makes them vulnerable to those poor decisions, then when they make that poor decision, you can back into the conversation by giving them a plausible out, by saying, I saw this post and it seems, remember we had that conversation about, which one kind of sticks out. This one really seems inconsistent from your others. And I'm wondering what was going on at that moment. If there was something getting in your way, or looking back on it now, is there anything you would do different? So that it is less about their character, because it really isn't about their character, and more about setting themselves up for success, helping them figure out what they can do to make it better after it's happened, and just always giving them a path forward so they don't get stuck in shame.
Yeah. And it makes sense that kids would need coaching and parenting through this aspect of their growing too. Just because it's on text or social media doesn't mean that we don't need to be involved. Let's talk a little bit about loneliness. This is a common problem in middle school, the feeling that I don't have any friends, or the people who want to hang out with me aren't the people that I want to hang out with, and feeling a kind of adrift, like I don't have a group or I don't have a best friend. How can we support kids through that?
Oh my gosh, that's such a huge topic. And so I'll ramble a little bit, but the first thing I want to just point out is that I think we misunderstand loneliness in middle schoolers. I think that a kid comes home and says, I'm lonely, and we immediately want to probably accurately say, but you have so many friends. Or, but you were just hanging out with so-and-so and so-and-so, and to just give them that evidence. And what I think we need to understand about loneliness in the middle school years is that they can be surrounded by people and feel lonely. So I think the first question is, what does lonely mean to you? Does it mean you don't have a real sense of comfort in the peer group you're in? Does it mean there's another group of kids who have more social status and you want social status? Does it mean that when you're playing soccer on the team, those particular kids are not your soulmate, so to speak, and you're spending so much time with that group that it's creating this sense of loneliness, even though at other times you are feeling better? So I think you want to just get at the root of what that loneliness means. We can ascribe all kinds of meaning to the words that kids use, but I think it's always worth poking a little bit under the surface to figure out what's going on. And then for the best friend piece, you can ask my middle schoolers here, I am super opposed to the whole concept of a best friend for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you were to talk to a lot of school counselors, they probably would share that you have two real garden variety kinds of problems. One is that you have two kids who are best friends and they spend all of their time together, and the relationship goes south and they are adrift. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, where to look. The second problem is when you have those dyads, you've got this other kid coming who feels like a third wheel, who's always feeling left out. And so it's kind of lose-lose in that way, but it's also lose-lose for a third way that I think kids don't intuitively understand. And this is where I think parents can jump in and help them. None of us as adults have one person who meets all of our needs. We might have the friend who we like to go jogging with, and the friend that we call when we know we need somebody who's really empathetic and a good listener and won't judge us. Someone who's great at keeping a secret, someone who isn't great at keeping a secret, but is so much fun. And when you want to do something really fun and laugh, they're your go-to person. And so sharing with our kids how lots of people in our lives meet different needs, and we have lots of best friends, lots of great friends, is something that we can share with them and encourage them to branch out. And floaters are really often the happiest kids socially anyway.
Okay, that's very helpful. And it turns out my mother was right. She said many years ago that she hated the best friend thing.
Oh, all right. Moms know best.
Well, when I was a kid in middle school, they had those necklaces where you'd have half a heart for one best friend and half for the other. And, you know, it was always, not only were the kids saying they were best friends, they were advertising it with jewelry.
I was that kid. If Lynn Annapole is listening, we made matching plaques. We had every kind of thing you could think of. And of course, at some point in middle school, we did go in different directions, and it was extremely hard, I think, for different reasons for both of us. But I think it's because we overfreighted the importance. And it was sixth grade when it happened. Elementary school for me went through sixth grade, but developmentally and in terms of our age, it's really normal to want a best friend, to have a best friend, but just to point out what the downside is of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me curious, Phyllis. What do you think is, how similar is middle school friendship now for our kids than it was to how it was for us when we were in middle school? Does the social media and modern things make that much of a difference, or are the basics the same, or what do you think?
I think the fundamentals of the tween phase, those middle school years, are really similar in the sense that you've got the identity exploration. You might shy away from risk taking. You might feel like everyone is staring at you. You have that egocentric piece. You're vulnerable. You're insecure. You're figuring out what makes you tick. You're figuring out who your friends are. What's different now, aside from, this global crisis of epic proportions,
that
little thing, which is really a huge thing for middle schoolers, because what it's done is taken away their ability to explore those social needs, lean into those social needs, those relational needs in the way they would have prior to the pandemic. And so what I'm seeing now is that social ties, friendships are everything. And if you can't recognize that takes priority right now for them, then you're kind of, missing the plot line. It's way more important than their grades, than pretty much anything else. And with good reason, because they have been deprived of all of those developmental events and opportunities to practice these skills. So they also are a little behind, and they're a little clumsier, and they're more sensitive. So that is a big deal for right now. But even before COVID, it was different, because while for me, it was, in the late 80s, when I was going through middle school, it was intense, and we had all of those same ups and downs, bumps in the roads, freaking out over Halloween costumes, all of it. But at the end of the day, after having all of those fraught interactions, we really could disconnect if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Now they go home, and it's like hours and hours of more of the same. And so really encouraging kids to take a break is going to help them kind of recover from just the onslaught of feelings they're having all day long in middle school.
Right. So if we get them to unplug and they can take a break, maybe family can be a softer landing zone. That's, they don't have to do the performance and the status seeking that they feel compelled to have at school.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. Or on the flip side, maybe they were getting bullied or treated poorly at school. It's an opportunity to compartmentalize a little bit, and to remember that that's not the sum of who they are. That's just one piece of their life. And I think it's really hard, especially when things are not going well, to remember that your in-school experience doesn't define you, isn't predictive of what your future will look like, and is just one part of your very present situational experience.
Great. Thank you. I just want to share as we're wrapping up. Sherry echoes what you were saying. Some middle school friendships disappear and then reappear in high school, refreshed and more mature. That's great. I've seen a little bit of that too. And I love this. Even as adults, we need healthy people in our yurt.
Oh my gosh. I may have to quote that one, especially when it's yurt time around here.
Well, anything else you want to add, Phyllis? We're so grateful to have had you today and for all our viewers.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Love your middle schooler. They're so funny. They're so great. I'm going to miss the phase in my own house when it's over, even though it has its tougher moments. And I think it's important to not allow whatever they're going through to impact us even more than it impacts them, because they really are looking to us to reassure them that they are going to be okay, and they are going to be okay. And they will really believe that if we can project that for them.
That's a great way to end. So we can feel and project the confidence that they may not be feeling about the way things are going. All right. Well, thank you, Phyllis, and goodbye, everybody. We will talk soon. Take care.